Thank you, everyone. First off, I just want to thank everybody for sponsoring me to go, and also for all your prayers for our success of our trip and our safety as well. Where do you start when you talk about something that you're on as a trip? It's difficult to get it in a short little time frame. It's been a full 2 weeks. A week was spent on the mission trip in Jericho, and then a week was on a tour. To describe it the best I can, it was an amazing experience. What I saw and witnessed, what I learned from a biblical and archaeological perspective, I feel I'm a better person for it. I feel that my faith has grown, I can't even describe it, so much. It's been an awesome experience. There are a lot of pictures that I have, but most of them are the tour. Working all day, you don't have time to take pictures of the patients you're working with. It wasn't until the end of the week where Phil and I talked, and we should have been taking pictures before and after to better show what the patient's deficits were and how they looked and presented, and then afterwards, both as an educational tool but as a marketing tool. So that would be next time. The pictures I said I do have, I can get printed out, and they'll be able to tour. So I'll do my best to give a verbal depiction of what it was like in Jericho. Flying 12 hours, 11 hours is an experience of itself, considering I never flew more than 4 hours before. Or meeting 32 people that I never met before was also an experience. I was given a little bit of a hard time through customs when I got there, and then I was held up for a good hour or two to depart, pulled aside. I guess I was deemed a high security risk as they put me through x-ray scanners and almost did a body search. It was quite an experience. But so be it. In any event, when I met the 32 people, when you have 32 strangers from all walks of life, a lot of them are retired, but they're so strong in their faith. And when people like that talk about their desire to serve God and to recognize their purpose of why they're here on earth and why they're there, you just want to eat it up. It just kind of consumes you, and you want more of it. And the belief and the overall feeling was, you know, everything will work out. God is in control. He's all-knowing, and the right patient will come along, and the right piece of equipment will just be there to serve your needs. And I'll explain more of that later. So the first day when we got there, we met everybody, and then we had to unload everything. As Phil will describe, Seeds of Hope is the partnership that Gain is connected to, and there were shipping containers, large shipping containers full of equipment, stuffed to the brim. So I was one of the ones sent over to unload equipment, and between unloading them, loading them on trucks, unloading trucks, I spent probably 3 or 4 hours doing that. It was just exhausting. Hundreds of wheelchairs, walkers, canes, crutches, boxes of hygiene products, blankets, you name it, just filled to the brim. So then we got ready to go the next day. The therapists, there were 6 therapy teams. I was the only male on the team, which was a concern from the cultural differences between men and women there. And then later on in the week, we had some local therapies from something called LifeGate Ministries assist us as well. So my team consisted of myself, I had a mechanic, and I had a support person to run around for some things. And I thought it was interesting, my mechanic, who I've become friends with, a 7-year-old man, he looked and talked like Mike Rowe. And he had no idea who he was. For those of you who know who he is, it was kind of a neat experience. So we had our banquet hall set up for us to work in, probably about twice the size of Redeemer, and the patients would come in. Jericho is located on the eastern part of Israel, what we call is the West Bank in Palestine, because it's on the western border of the Jordan River, just like you have the East Shore and West Shore in Harrisburg. The Jordan River is not very wide, probably about as wide as the church, which seems odd. You think of something so huge and enormous. So that gives you a little visual representation there. So we're in this banquet hall, all the wheelchairs are set up. There was a vision clinic being run simultaneously. I believe they saw about 900 patients in a week, and we saw about 250 patients or so. After 40 or 50 patients, I kind of lost track of who I saw. Some would be 20 to 30 minutes of treatment time, others took 2 to 3 hours. We had an intake desk like you would at a hospital with a physician and a nurse, and everybody had an interpreter. My interpreter was Muslim. There were also Arab Christian interpreters. I was surprised to learn how many Arab Christians were in that area. I just thought it was all Muslim. So we had many great conversations discussing politics, ethics, all that. In any event, patients would come in, we would get assigned a patient, and you try to make an assessment the best you can. But there was a cultural barrier, so not a lot of information would come our way. So I had to probe and ask questions. As a home therapist, every time I meet a new patient, that's what I always have to do. Make an assessment, look at their diagnosis, and get a feel or an understanding of their home environment. Most people live in homes, but they're very rudimentary at best. They don't have a first floor setup with bathrooms or bedrooms. If they live on a second or third floor, it's not a normal flight of stairs like we have. It's carved in stone in the hillside, and it might be 20 steps or more to get up to the second floor. When I would ask those questions, how many steps to get into your house or how many steps on the second floor, I chuckled because one guy's sitting there counting on his fingers and he said 300 or 400 meters, and I just looked at him, and he's referencing from the corner up to his front way around the bend, where I just wanted to know how many steps to get in. A lot of times people get carried around, whether they're small as a child or a full-size adult. So it's pretty interesting to see that. By midweek, my interpreter would have a better understanding of what I was looking for, and he would already lay out all those questions so I could get to work. A lot of complex medical diagnoses, a lot of neurological problems. The physician and I talked, and we figured it's quite possibly not only due to poor medical care, but it might just be from, in that culture, a lot of people marry their cousins and second cousins and so forth, so you have a lot of birth defects. Between severe cerebral palsy, strokes, spinal bifida, real bizarre neurological cases, you see it all there. So when you try to put somebody in a wheelchair or size up the right equipment, it's not just a regular wheelchair that you see someone in church with. As a therapist, we call them special chairs. They have recline features, tilt in space, and when you need a chair like that, somebody can just fall out of it because they're unsafe or they just thrash their body around. So then you have to get different harnesses and straps and supports, whether it's for the legs, for the torso, laterally or in front of them, for their head, their neck. One thing keeps leading to the other, and it just makes it more and more complex. So then you would try to size it up accordingly. And there's a lot of patients that you see, and if I wasn't busy seeing a patient, I would run off to go help somebody else. Phil would ask me almost daily if I took a break and had lunch yet, and I think maybe around 3 o'clock usually when I got to it for brief time. I felt my purpose there was to serve patients and then also to represent Redeemer. That was why I was there. So I had no problems running around, and I'd be exhausted by nighttime, but it was obviously worth it. Some of the patients that stand out would be a gentleman who had a severe stroke, real tight, and I'm sure you've all seen people walk around all kind of clenched up at the mall or somewhere. I stretched him out, taught him how to do it, and then we had to custom make a cushion and a backrest and an arm trough to support his arm. So now I'm pulling all the different people there, the seamstresses, we would carve foam, cut wood down. I had so many people involved in the case, and that took several hours to get it fixed. The simplest thing was just cutting those pool noodles, that high-density foam, and carving out to open his hand up so it wasn't clenched, and it made all the difference. Then we could insert things in the foam for him to hold and feed himself. Just changed his world. He wanted me to leave for the day and hang out with him and have lunch and dinner at his house, but we couldn't obviously do that. So little stories like that. That one stood out. Another woman who was 80, lived on the second floor, she crawled everywhere to get around. So we got her the right equipment, a wheelchair and a walker, but then my mechanic gave her his knee pads, and she would hug and kiss them. And you know, we learn words like sukran means thank you, and sabulba is cool or great. So those are things you learn. A lot of the people don't have a lot of equipment, like I said, or medical care, so they come in, they want everything. You know, who blames them? But some were shopping, they were just picking around what they wanted. Others you had to explain in detail why I'm recommending this versus the other thing. Kind of like back home with a patient, you have to prove to recommend why you want this device for them. Whereas one person would need one thing, others would need several things. But the level of ingenuity is amazing because so many things are jerry-rigged. There would be chairs that people would come in that I don't know how they were intact. If I just blew on it, I thought it would just implode. It was just amazing to see. And it's humbling. I'm humbled every day, I feel, in my job because I go into homes where there's filled with, unfortunately, bugs, or there's the decay and rot, or I go into a mansion. But to truly see something like that, it's very humbling. And it makes it all in perspective when you complain you don't have something. The two other patients that stand out the most would be a brother and a sister who had a very advanced progressive cerebellar deficit. Your cerebellum's in the back of your brain, controls our balance and how we walk and so forth. Fitting them in their wheelchairs, made all the difference. That they were falling all the time. Amazing they didn't get injured, but they just fell constantly. So the parents were grateful. But then we took it a step further, and I was able to train them that if they pushed their wheelchairs like a shopping cart, they could walk. So they were walking around the facility, every now and then a little hand guarding just to kind of steer them right. And they were all smiles and laughter. It just made a big difference. So that was pretty impressive. And the last patient, when I referenced about finding the right equipment, a boy came in about 20 years old. He looked to be about 8 physically. He was twisted visually like a pretzel, just so spastic and tight. He never walked. His parents and brother carried him everywhere. So he came to me, and first I thought, my goodness, what am I going to do for this guy? And then I kind of knew, and I jumped to it. And about an hour into it, I realized I wasn't satisfied with the chair I started with and making all the adjustments. And I made a makeshift bed on a folding table, picked them up, put them back, picked them up, put them back. So I went looking in the supply closet again, or the supply area rather, and sure enough, I found that chair that I needed with the proper equipment, the proper cushion, and I just kind of paused and looked at it, and it just rang true, the whole theme of, like everybody said, if you put your faith in God and trust in it, you'll find the equipment. It almost felt like that epiphany where the ray of light shining down on that piece of device that's going to move it. I'm like, there it is. It wasn't there an hour ago, but sure enough. So that just really struck me and was pretty impressive. And after about 3 hours or so, we got it worked out, and he was in a wheelchair, and he wasn't falling out, and it was perfect. So that summed up the week, and after the week was done, we were able to donate a lot of equipment to the local nursing homes, so it was nice not to have to load all that gear back into those containers. And then we started our trip after that. So again, thank you so much for letting me be part of that. I know the people there feel blessed that we were serving them, but I feel I was blessed to be part of that and experience it. And I would love to go back again. 2 weeks is a long time. You know, you get homesick at times, and the kids were patient and they had their moments. I can only imagine like somebody who's in the military or away for so long what that feels like. But I would go again in a heartbeat. I would love to serve Redeemer, serve God, and serve whoever to help out overseas. So thank you. Phil?
Well, I want to pick up on one of the things that Sal said. He was marveling at the fact that the chair he needed showed up, and it almost seemed like it wasn't there an hour ago. He's reflecting on something that we have, that have been on the mission field for a long time, experienced time after time after time. At first you think, well, no, it just happened, and you can't really call it a miracle. But it occurs enough times you go, okay, this isn't us. God is working in this case, and there's no question that God works. And when you are to do His will and bring love to people, He will work with you and fulfill His purpose. You know, in the scripture readings for today, from Isaiah, it says, "Is this not the fast that I choose, to loose the bonds of injustice? Is it not to share your bread with the hungry?" And when we go over and do those kind of mission things, we feel that God is really working with us, through us, to accomplish His purpose. And in the Gospel of Matthew, it says, "You are the light of the world. Let your light shine before others so that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven." And we really felt that we were glorifying God by doing the work. Now, Sal and all the therapists were head down, you know, morning till night, and he talked about how tired he was. I had the privilege of being able to stand back a little bit and watch all this going on, but you could really see how even the interpreters, the Muslim interpreters, were really feeling that the good that is done. We had such a great reception in that part of the world, and I've talked about it when I've been back from other mission trips, but it's really obvious this time more than any other time. It kind of came together. The governor of Jericho visited us twice to express his thanks for us doing that, to also offer his help if there was anything he could do from a governmental reason to help us. We were very thankful of him and his support, and he's really a good supporter of Seeds of Hope. Seeds of Hope, the partner ministry, started by a gentleman by the name of Tas Seder. He used to be a sniper for Yasser Arafat. He used to kill Israelis. became so bad in the Middle East when he tried to assassinate the king of Jordan that he had to flee. Came to the U.S., got a green card. The way you stay in the U.S. when he came was to marry an American. He did so. He wasn't a Christian at the time. He was a Muslim terrorist. But God brought him to him. God brought his wife to him. God brought his whole family to him. When he became a Christian, he said, I got to go serve my people, and went back to the Middle East. Now, Israel knew him. Is there any way Israel would let him go back to the Palestinian territories? From a human perspective, I don't know how that could happen. But God allowed it to happen. He went back. He started his ministry in Gaza, started evangelizing, got bombed out. You know, you got to be a little careful in parts of the world like Gaza. You're starting to proclaim Christ. There are lots of enemies of Christ in some parts of the world. So he then went to Jericho, which is a little more hospitable. He also didn't be quite as bold in talking about Christ. It was more showing the love of God. And now they have a credibility there in the Middle East which you would not believe, a credibility which extends to the fact that they opened a water bottling plant, and that's a miracle in and of itself. They found water there when water wasn't even seen there by anybody. The Israeli authorities, who gave them permission to drill and tells them where exactly they have to drill, told them Tass's backyard was where he's going to drill. And they found good water. They now have a water bottling plant. And when they opened the plant, they had a lot of hostility in the whole area because the Muslims around there were saying, that's a Christian plant, we should boycott that, they shouldn't be allowed to do that. And so they were calling a meeting. Head of Fatah, the governor of Jericho, all these people were coming, and Tass was going to go, and the governor said, no, you don't go. You let me go for you. A 7-hour meeting, and they walked out of that, and they were allowed to open their bottling plant and sell water there. That's the kind of goodwill. That's the kind of message that is going on in that part of the world, that we can tell people about Christ. Now, Sal told you about Arab Christians, and they are. If they come from a family that was Christian, they're called Arab Christians. But if someone comes to Christ who is a Muslim, they're not called Christians over there. They're called Muslim background believers. And if you're an MBB in that part of the world, you have converting from Islam to Christianity is not something that Islam likes. In fact, quite often they'll put a death sentence on you. So the Muslim background believers have to stay a little bit under the radar, but there are more and more coming. You know, it's the same way in Israel. We go to Israel, they're not called Jewish Christians. What are they called? Messianic Jews. They're still Christians, but it's a Messianic Jew. I can't tell you how pleased I am that Redeemer is a sending church that supported Sal, that supported us to go and bring light of Christ into a part of the world I never would have envisioned working in. 10 years ago when we were going to Russia, I would have said, I would have loved to work in the Middle East. How's that possible? How's it possible? Well, it's possible because God allowed a mission like Seeds of Hope to spring up because of Tass, who was a sniper, who invited us over. With God, all things are possible. Thank you, Redeemer, for being part of this.